Recently, during a Canadian media appearance, we veered into the topic of transgender individuals in women's prisons. And I'm not going to be commenting on that topic in this video because there's something else I want to talk about first. And that's because after this interview, I received a message from a correctional officer at a Canadian prison who was pretty unhappy that I referred to them as guards in my interview. As he said in his message to me, I find it extremely disrespectful and derogatory to these officers. They work in extremely hostile and dangerous environments and deserve respect. And he also made an interesting comparison. He compared what I had done, calling a correctional officer a guard, to misgendering a transgender person. And I suspect some people might find that comparison offensive, but I actually think it's a really good one. And this is why I think that, because the individual made an assumption that my labeling them as a guard and not a correctional officer is inherently disrespectful. I dispute that, because words are not inherently disrespectful, nor are they inherently harmful, nor are they inherently, well, anything at all. Words are noises that come from another human's mouth. And yet we seem to have a social tendency to create offense out of words based on some preconceived set of rules of what should be said, rather than based on the evidence behind an individual's particular usage. See, I know very little about prisons. I've certainly never been in one. This is a domain that is very far away from my area of expertise. So to me, correctional officer, guard, I've never really even thought about the difference. And I can appreciate that to this individual there is a really big difference and that it's meaningful. I can appreciate that now that it's been brought to my attention. And for my part, I can graciously accept the suggestion to change my language. In fact, I intend to do so because I have no reason to use a word that's no longer industry standard. But we cannot control other people's language. I'm not saying we ought not to. I'm saying we can't. It isn't possible. And when we make people feel judged or defensive or shamed for saying things that they most likely meant in a positive light, we do not help our cause. We give people a reason to dislike us. That is why the comparison to dead naming or misgendering of transgender people is a really solid comparison. Because in that domain, we've created a climate where people are afraid to talk to or about transgender people because we've created a climate where they're worried they're going to mess up. They're worried that they're going to be shamed because they didn't get it right. They're worried that they're going to get in trouble. It's toxic, and in the end, it alienates transgender people. People end up not wanting to talk to people like me because it's just too big of a social risk. And I get that. I once got chewed out by an accessibility advocate for referencing wheelchairs rather than people in wheelchairs. This happened even though the conversation was literally about the chairs themselves and how we could fit more in a church to accommodate our flourishing crowd of people with accessibility needs. It is hot, but I have found some shade. What if we stopped judging people by what they say and instead judge people based on their intention? You know, judge them by the message that they are trying to get across. And when we're not clear on that message, we clarified rather than taking offense. See, I get she/her from most people because it's usually pretty obvious what I'm going for, and most people want to create workable interactions with other people. And when I don't get she/her, it's usually from confusion. I'm on the phone, so someone isn't seeing this, or it's a slip up because my voice is low, or something else about me has just sort of sent the signal of male. Getting called he, it's fine, but the mortification on people's faces when they realize that they messed up, that makes me feel bad that they feel bad. And yeah, occasionally people call me he intentionally to try and goad me. It's almost always online, and it's pretty obvious because they usually end up stacking an uncomfortable number of pronouns into the same sentence to prove a point. When that happens, someone is trying to be an asshole, or to get a reaction out of me. They're not even worth my time. And then I have some other friends who insist on using he based on an internal principle that they must always only ever use biologically based pronouns, no exception. I think that's kind of silly, and it's also impossible because they won't know when they're breaking their own rule as long as somebody passes. But it doesn't matter because in the end, I cannot control other people's language. I can only control my own. And when I have the opportunity to understand someone's intention behind the pronouns that they use for me, what pronouns mean to them, and why they're nailed to a belief that calling me she even once is not being done to hurt me, but rather because of some belief that they have that they're beholden to, well, I can empathize with them, and even when I personally disagree with them, we can still be friends. We see these conflicts on language at the core of so many identity politic debates. In my lifetime, we have moved from calling the individuals who lived in North America Indians, to Aboriginals, to Indigenous, to Native Americans. I want to get it right, but at this point, I'm not even clear what term I should be using. What all of these conflicts have in common are individuals who have, on their own basis, created a rule of language that they expect everybody else to follow. And that doesn't work because communication is a two-way process between the speaker and the listener. If both do not hold a good faith intention to want to communicate with one another, then we won't get very far in holding productive discourse.